My name is Joshua Williams, and this is my Physics 2211 Lab 5 presentation on the force of a punch. Now, we all know the famous Superman 2025 movie. We all loved it, but there was one scene in particular that we loved. It has to do with this rage baiter right here, Lex Luthor. Now, as you can see, he is a master of hate. He hates Superman with every fiber of his being, and I personally cannot grasp the amount of hate that he holds for Superman, but physics can.
1A! 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 1A!
Now, we're going to have to use every single monkey in our arsenal to calculate the amount of force that was punched onto Superman by his clone. Now, the purpose of this lab was to observe and analyze the motion of Superman's clone's punch as it hit Superman in the face and determine the force inflicted on Superman by the punch. To calculate the force of the punch, I use Newton's second law in its momentum form, where force equals mass times a change in velocity over change in time. I also use the velocity and position update equations to understand the clone's motion frame by frame. Other physics principles I used are, again, Newton's second law, as well as the velocity from position formula, which states that velocity equals change in position over change in time. The system I analyzed was Superman's face, or more specifically, the center of mass at which the force of impact was put onto Superman, and the surroundings included the attacking clone and the environment. I assumed that mostly vertical motion was at play, and it was a very short single impulse, and the gravity and friction were negligible during the punch. From the tracker program I used to mark Superman's center of mass as well as every frame of the punch, the video was recorded at 24 frames per second, so each frame corresponds to a time step of 1 over 24 of a second. This gave me the accurate position and velocity data to work with. Now, from the tracker data, I measured a peak velocity of 0.481 meters per second. The clone's mass was taken from the actor David Cornsweet's weight of 107.96 kilograms, and the punch lasted one frame, or 0.04167 seconds. Using F equals mass times change in velocity over change in time, I calculated a punch force of 1,246.29 newtons. Now, this force of the punch is backed by the average force of an adult male's punch, which is 800 to 1200 newtons. There are several possible sources of error. One is that the frame timing isn't perfectly precise. The tracker point selection may vary slightly. The camera angles introduce distortion, which means that the calibration stick to measure the distance of Superman and his clone isn't perfectly accurate. And because the movie was filmed in 24 frames per second, the actual punch may actually only be a fraction of that, but we can't tell because it wasn't filmed in 60 or 120 frames per second. Now, what if Superman's clone actually had Superman's strength and we calculated that? Well, in the movie, Superman's greatest feat is stopping a falling 50-story building. That feat requires roughly 11.2 million tons of force, and if we take just 1% of that strength to put into his punch, it would exceed 224 million newtons. That means that the true potential of Superman's clone's punching power would be roughly 180,000 times stronger than the 1,200 Newton punch we measured. In conclusion, using tracker and Newton's second law, I calculated that the clone's punch delivered 1,246.29 newtons of force. This is within the range of the normal human punching power, which makes sense because we can't scientifically take into account Superman's strength. But if we did, we would know that the true force would be several million newtons. Overall, the motion tracking proved to be an effective method for analyzing the real physics events of Lex Luthor's hate against Superman and the punch inflicted onto Superman's noggin.